This is a lot of hot air.
All right, we are live. All right, everyone. Good morning. It is 10:30 on February 13th, Friday. First order of business this morning is H 67, an act relating to legislative operations and government accountability. And we have a new proposal of language to review. And we are going to start off with council. Mr. Devlin, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, doing well. Thank you very much for having me, committee members. For the record, my name is Tim Devlin, Legislative Counsel. And you have before you draft 2.2 of a committee bill from this committee, which will be in the format of a strike all. And again, this is the strike all amendment to the House Bill number 67, an act relating to legislative operations, government accountability. So this amendment really just establishes a pilot government accountability committee, similar to the longevity of the summer government accountability committee, or summer GAC, only it kind of lives twice as long. It does jettison other kind of elements of the previous bill having to do with auditor accounts, periodic reporting, and let's see what else. And some language about the chief performance officer's annual report as well. So I'll just go through this top to bottom. It shouldn't take too long, but I will, because of its brevity, I figure I'm going to go into some of the details about the powers and duties, if that's okay with the committee. Okay. So first we have the purpose and findings sections, which really actually will be just purpose or remove and findings for next draft, because there are no findings. So the purpose of this act is to advise the principal government, purpose of this act is to advance the principle of government accountability by examining how evidence is used to inform policy, how state laws are implemented, and how legislation may be structured to achieve its intended outcomes. This act seeks to support consistent and transparent accountability practices through simple, clear, independent, objective, fast, fact-based processes. I should note that this also removes two pseudo definitions from the prior bill that had defined what government accountability meant, as well as what government oversight meant. So moving on to establishing the pilot government accountability committee. So section 2, we have A, and I should just note this is session law due to its ephemeral nature. So we will create, the bill and as amended will create the pilot government accountability committee to examine government practices and make recommendations on improving those practices and develop effective tools for evaluating government accountability. Membership, now we turn to page 2, subsection B. This committee shall be composed of the following 5 members. Let's see, and then I should just say we have 5 plus 3. So we break it up into 2 different categories of members. We have 5 voting members, and then additionally 3 non-voting members, putting the total at 8. Of the 5 voting members, 2 current members will come from the House of Representatives, not all from the same political party, who shall be appointed by the Speaker of the House, then 2 from the Senate, again, not from the same political party, all from the same political party, 2 appointed from by the Committee on Committees, and 1 member who previously served but no longer is a member of the General Assembly to be appointed by the governor. Now moving on to the 3 non-voting members. Let's see, we have the Chief Performance Officer or designee, the Auditor of Accounts or designee, and 1 member related who shall have relevant experience and knowledge in the matters being considered by the committee to be appointed by the governor. And rereading that now, and I think I either inadvertently left out a word or that should probably be massaged in some way. So just the 1 member related to what. So I'll take a closer look at that next. So then we have moving on to what the committee will be considering, and this is under subsection C, titled Selection of Issues for the Committee. The chair of each standing committee in the House of Representatives shall submit one recommendation to the chair of the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs, and the chair of each standing committee in the Senate shall submit one recommendation to the chair of the Senate Committee on Government Operations as to what singular issue should be considered by the Pilot Government Accountability Committee, House Committee on the Government Operations and Military Affairs, and the Senate Committee on Government Operations. So each select 3 from the received recommendations and refer those to the Pilot Government Accountability Committee on or before February 28th, 2027. So just to kind of put that in more lay terms, we have a kind of collection effort or almost crowdsourcing of ideas from all the committee chairs in both chambers. They send them to the House and Senate GovOps committees, who then narrow it down to 3 in each, and will present a total of 6 to the Pilot Government Accountability Committee, and they will pick from there out the one issue that they'll be concentrating for the duration of this committee's existence. We then move on to powers and duties under subsection D here. And the committee shall have duties as described in the section. 1. Examination of issues selected by committee. The committee shall be empowered to examine, investigate, and otherwise analyze issues that it selects pursuant to subsection C of this section. And I should state there, I misstated something previously. It's not necessarily limited to one. This language clearly contemplates, enables them to select more than wanted. Apologies. 2, review program performance. The committee shall examine whether state programs and initiatives are advancing policy goals that are established in statute, including consideration of outcome data, implementation, progress, and operational challenges. 3, consideration of evidence and evaluation. The committee shall review available research, independent evaluations, audits, and performance measures relevant to state programs and policies, and encourage the use of reliable data and evaluation methods in legislative decision-making. 4, identification of effective practices and improvement opportunities. The committee shall highlight approaches that demonstrate positive outcomes, identify barriers to effective implementation, and recommend reasonable opportunities for improvement, coordination, and replication where appropriate. 5, support for alignment of policy, funding, and outcomes. The committee shall provide information and recommendations that assist the General Assembly in aligning appropriations, statutory intent, and measurable results. 6, monitoring of follow-up actions. The committee shall, when issuing recommendations, request updates from relevant agencies regarding actions taken or progress made as appropriate. 7, coordination with existing oversight entities. Committee shall work in consultation with legislative committees of jurisdiction, the state auditor, chief performance officer, and other related entities to avoid duplication, to support efficient use of state resources. 8, surveying of data and data impact. The committee shall survey available state data and documented impacts to better understand implementation, outcomes, and opportunities for improvements. 9, communication of outcomes. The committee shall consider how and when program outcomes and performance information are communicated, including the audiences receiving such information and the clarity, timeliness, and usefulness of communication for supporting transparency, public understanding, and informed decision-making. The 10th, final item, development of evaluation tools. The committee may consider the development or use of appropriate tools and methods to assess program outcomes and performance, including measures that support consistent evaluation, transparency, and informed legislation and administrative decision-making. I know that was a lot. I'm just going to pause there for a second, see if there's any questions, comments of that nature. Okay.
Seeing no hands.
So moving on to subsection E, assistance, and just for reference, we're halfway through page 5. The committee shall have the administrative, technical, and legal assistance of the Office of Legislative Counsel, Joint Fiscal Office. I should just note here that the what was legislative operations has been folded into the Office of Legislative Counsel. F, we do the report. Now, there are two reports here, essentially one interim and then one final to be delivered by this committee. On or before November 15th, 2027, and then again on or before November 15th, 2028. The committee shall present and submit a written report to the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs and the Senate Sister Committee that includes any findings on the issues examined and detailed description of how the committee fulfilled its duties and any recommendations for legislative action. So essentially, this will run its course over 2 years. At the halfway mark, there shall be a report and second report. Meetings of the committee, or subsection G. Legislative Council shall call the first meeting of the committee to occur on or before March 1st, 2027. The committee shall select a chair from among its members at its first meeting, and a majority of the voting members shall constitute quorum. And just want to point out that's of the voting members, and it's not necessarily of those present. H, compensation and reimbursement. This does contemplate not only legislators to be on it, but other individuals who, one, certainly has to not be a legislator, but who certainly was one prior, but they'll be for the public essentially. Anyways, for attendance during the meeting, they'll be compensated pursuant to our regular mechanism, which is in 2 VSA section 23. It's budget for not more than 10 meetings. And also I should include that says essentially state employees who are drawing a salary are compensated beyond what the regular compensation is. So that would apply to the chief performance officer, auditor of accounts. And then other members of the committee who are members, legislative members, that is, will be compensated regular scheme, which is under 32 VSA, section 1010, again, not for 10 meetings. And there's an appropriation of $2,000 to be made for these. And then finally, we have the prospective repeal or sunset of the committee, which states that it will cease to exist on June 30th, 2029. So they'll provide that final report November 15th, 2028. Roughly 6 months later, they will formally cease to exist. Finally, this the effective date, the act shall take effect on passage. That's everything.
Okay. Yeah, that's a notable revamp. I just want to say first and foremost, thank you to Rep. Waters Evans and Rep. Boyden and the other folks that they've been working with, excuse me, for putting a lot of time and energy and effort into revamping this. So first off, thank you for that. Any questions for council right now? All right. And then wanted to afford time to representatives who worked on this to run through this from their perspective with the changes.
Yeah.
It's minimal. Yep.
Yeah,
Would you like me to stay here?
sure.
Okay.
Yes, please, if you don't mind. So we've been working on this with Rep. Garofano as well. And we have been talking to a lot of different people. So last, if you remember, sort of refresher, last session, we had a different iteration of this. And we had one the biennium before. They were similar. So the concerns that we heard from people as we were going and talking to them and the folks in appropriations committee, they were concerned about the fact that there has been a GAC is Government Accountability Committee. I'm just going to float this slogan out there. The GAC is back. What do you think? I ran it by Rep. Boyden already. She seemed amenable.
Remarketing it or?
Thank you.
I think it needs to be a button.
Yeah, or like a tattoo or something.
Yeah.
So we're just, the GAC is back. That's what we're gonna do. A song? I don't know. So what we tried to do is address the concerns that people had. And the concerns that folks were having when we heard with them is that we don't want to recreate this thing they had before. It was 8 years, was it, that committee? And no disrespect or offense meant to the people who were on it, but I feel like they struggled to actually make it work and not much came out of that. Is that it? Correct?
That's my
Thing to say.
understanding. Yeah.
Right, so,
It was like winding down as I came in, so I never really did.
yeah. And so what we're trying to do is learn from what they, where they kind of things went awry, and make sure that we're not recreating something that already didn't work. But also when we were, testifying last year on appropriations, they said, oh, we already tried this and it didn't work. And why would we do it again? So we really tried to construct something that is more forward looking, more collaborative with the auditor's office, the chief performance officer who we heard from earlier, Justin Kenny, like a couple weeks ago. And for it really to be the legislature checking in on itself and trying to come to the point where we're working this accountability and oversight into our own legislation as we move forward. Because as much as I think we'd like to think that everything that we do is great and is going to work and it's going to be awesome, that, sometimes things don't work and that's okay, but then they tend to linger and we're wasting time and we're wasting money and we're wasting resources on these things. So we tried to, Rep. Whiting can talk about how we, if you don't mind, about how we, pared down the committee, maybe some questions that we have, so a couple things we've been trying to figure out and would love some input on. Just to make sure it's doing what we want it to do, which is hold ourselves accountable.
I would note that the sunset on the committee is a government accountability check-in. So we're kind of putting in a measure that we hope also translates to further legislation that it gets proposed in the future as well. So that way it forces us to check in on this committee, check in on the legislation that we're passing in 2 years and see, is it doing what we hope it is doing, and do any modifications need to be made? And then maybe the committee ceases to exist or they continue. I hope they continue. But I think some things that we're looking to make adjustments to or kind of like workshop are adding definitions of government accountability and government oversight, just to provide the committee with a little more direction to their work. The membership of the committee, like Representative Evans just mentioned, it should be truly an oversight of the legislature. So we're kind of wiggling on the governor's appointments there, and maybe just have only House and Senate members like the past iterations of the bill had, current House and Senate members. I personally like the connection to the chief performance office and the auditor's office to just kind of use the resources that they have as well, existing resources that are a little underutilized. And also workshopping the selection of issues for the committee to decide on. Again, we want to provide them with direction, but also allow them to figure out like what will work best for them.
Yeah, and some of the concerns that we've heard people say is that and it's really important to us and to the concept, I think, not us personally, but just to this as an idea, is making sure that it's not political, so that nobody thinks that it's going to be a situation, because it really should never be a situation where someone's like, I don't like that one particular program in that one particular agency, and I'm going to have see if we can get the government accountability committee to go after them and see what they can find out. And like that's definitely not the intent. So we are trying to make sure that the way the committee's, who makes up the committee, but also the selection process of how they pick which bills or programs or whatever they're looking at, to make sure that it's collaborative and that people are, it would be great if people just volunteered things. Like if committees could choose something to submit to the Government Accountability Committee and say, this is something we'd like for you to look at. We just got a report on this, or something like that. But if anyone has any ideas about how to make it really fair, impartial, and covering lots of different aspects of government, that would be great, because we're just thinking it through, I think. What else was different that we did? There's no more subpoena power.
Yeah, past iterations had a subpoena power.
The only appropriation, or there's no appropriation, it's just per diems for the committee.
Yeah, so it's likely that this committee will mostly meet outside of the legislative session. So that's where the per diem is. I think they have the power to meet during session, but because we're all so busy, then they'll likely just meet outside of session.
Just have a question for you both. How you're thinking about the difference between looking at the agency of administration, which does have, quite a few metrics that they look at and reports that they collect, versus what the legislature is doing. So this is ultimately for the legislature as a kind of communication tool to find out what's going on in state government, or is it trying to check on how we write legislation? Or if I know that's part of what we're wrestling with, or what you're wrestling with too, but just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
I would say it's kind of a combination of both, of looking at what we have put in place and how it is being implemented, kind of forward looking, to then help future decisions.
Like how you're crafting the legislation and
Yeah,
Yeah,
and like how things have been successful and how that can further be implemented for future looking.
It would be nice, so we were talking about a good. She doesn't know this yet, so this will be a fun surprise for the director of animal welfare. But like, for instance, that would be a good program to start with, working some of the language into it about, what are we hoping to achieve with that program, and what's going to happen in 2 years. We'll check back and say, have we charged that division with doing X, Y, and Z, and have they done it yet? And if they haven't, how can we get there? But get us to a point where we're working that into our legislation moving forward. So it's not, we don't want to be duplicative of anything else that's happening in any other department. That's why we have the auditor and the CPO involved, because we want to make sure we're not just doubling up on stuff for the sake of doubling up. You know what I mean? And we want to make sure that JFO and Ledge Council don't have a ton of extra work to do on this. A lot of the information that this committee would want, I think it's stuff that JFO is kind of already equipped to provide if we asked for it. It's their job anyway. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
Anything else?
If anyone has any ideas or wants to talk about it, you know where to find us, right here at this table all the day.
Tuesdays through Fridays.
That's right.
You can find us on YouTube. All right. No, I mean, really good work on honing this in. This looks like it's getting close to being ready.
Yeah.
And barring any other questions for the committee members and or council, our next order of business is at 11. So I was just going to call a brief break until we hit that hour, if that's okay with everyone.
Yes.
All right. Nick, you shall break until 11 a.m.